Welcome back, everyone. We're at episode 12 now. We've stayed a bit of consistency. Consistency's key, as they say. We're here with a special guest, Ian from Mentoring Men. How are you today, Ian? And can you just run us through what got you started in mentoring men in the first place? Like, it's a big step to take from, I think you were in IT back before this.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So it's great to be here. I've got no idea what I'm in for, but
Thanks for coming on, mate.
We don't bite.
Go pour yourself a scotch.
I'll find out how it goes. You want me to give a bit of my backdrop, just my story? That will let you know, I guess, how this all started.
For sure.
So I'm married. I've got 4 kids, and we just had our 11th grandchild.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Months ago. And looking at you guys, my kids are old enough to be your parents.
I don't know about the way I look, though. I look pretty old.
So for most of my working life was aimed at making money. I started off as a clerk in Telstra and worked my way up into a fairly senior role in IT. So it was about making money and delivering software changes. And then throughout 2013, I started to think more and more that there was more to my life than just about making money and delivering software changes. And I've been meditating on this. And on the 10th of September, 2013, I got on the train to come to work. I continued reading a book one of my daughters had given me. And when I turned the page, what I read transformed my thinking. A few months later, I quit my job. So I've been a volunteer since 2014. Initially, I was led down the path of mentoring kids in high schools, and then through the Raise Foundation. And then in addition to that, I started mentoring kids in primary school through Kids Hope. And then in addition to that, I started being a coordinator for the coach mentoring program, which is into the family environment. And then in 2018, I was mentoring a young guy at one of the Sydney schools. And in the very first mentoring meeting, he shared with me that his father had suicided. His mum was an alcoholic in rehab. He was living with his grandparents, which he hated. And then he just looked at me and he started crying and he said, "Ian, help me." And in this mentoring program, you can debrief with a program counsellor. So I had a chat to her later on, I guess looking for advice. And she surprised me. She said, "Ian, are you okay?" And I said, "I'm okay." And she asked again, and I just started crying myself. And, how can you fix that situation? What can I do? And I was flat. Normally I'm fairly upbeat, but I was flat for a couple of months. And one Saturday morning, I realized I actually wanted to have a mentor myself. We call it life mentoring. It's not business mentoring. It's not where you're going to fix someone and pass on knowledge, and it's just support. It's like it's just being there. So I looked around for an organization that provided life mentoring to men, and there was nothing. As a demographic, we struggle more in life than probably any other demographic. Our suicide rate's 3 times that of women. We struggle with vulnerability, with shame, with sharing our emotions. I couldn't believe it. So it motivated me to write a proposal to establish what was going to become Mentoring Men. And there's been so many, some people would say coincidences along this journey, but a couple of weeks after writing this proposal, which I hadn't shown anyone, I was invited to the local RSL, Hornsby RSL, to hear our local federal member, Julian Lisa, speak. And he formed a partnership with Lifeline. And what he was trying to do was to get representatives from every organisation within his electorate to attend suicide prevention training. It was a course put on by Lifeline Accidental Counsellor. But in his talk, he shared about his own father. And over 20 years ago, his father had suicided. He talked about not being able to see the signs that he would now have seen, given a better understanding. And it was a really passionate, moving talk that he gave And I don't know why. I actually took my proposal to this. I don't know why, but in a manila folder. As soon as he finished, I made a beeline for him. He saw me coming. And I said, Julian, that was fantastic. But where was the support that could have prevented your dad or anyone getting to the point of crisis? And he got it straight away. He said, Ian, come and talk to him. And I went and saw him in his office. He signed on as our ambassador. He arranged for one of the directors and myself to go to Canberra. That 10th of September, 2013, the day I read What Transformed My Life, is also World Suicide Prevention Day. It's one of these incredible coincidences along the path. So that was it. Julian signed on, and then it was, okay, I'm doing this. And this has been my purpose for the last 3 years. I put huge amounts of time. I had no idea how much effort would go into this, but it's booming. It's a critically needed program, and we're saving lives. We're transforming lives. And anyway, do you want long answers or short answers?
Long. This is going for as long. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
What was the book and what did you read? You're on mute, Ian.
I said to someone the other day, Zoom should put a button that says you're on mute that flashes up in big letters. I just did that because I wanted to blow my nose. So I want to say at the outset that Mentoring Men is open to all men. We don't care what race, beliefs, religion, culture. In fact, we've just, we're on SBS News a couple of months ago because we delivered our first mentor training course in Arabic. A couple of weeks ago, we delivered one in Nepalese. Anyway, but me personally, I come from a Christian background, and the book I read was Sun Stand Still. And what I read, it was these words, which I should have had open.
Take your time. No pressure, Ian. Don't worry, mate.
You can edit this, can't you?
Yeah. No, it's better. It's better natural.
There we go. So the question I've been meditating on was the meaning of life. And what it said, we feel like we're doing our part as long as we live decent lives, sort of tick. Stay out of trouble. Well, not in the early days, but at what age I was in trouble. But now, pay taxes, tick. Have babies, tick. Make a living, tick. Buy a boat. I even had a boat. And here it is. Hit age 59 and a half. Collect retirement, die. So I read this on the 10th of September 2013. I was born on the 10th of March 1954. I was 59 and a half to the day I read this. Like, why would an author be 59 and a half? He retired at 60 or 65 or 70. And then a couple of days later, I met someone I'd never met before. Someone, the daughter who gave me this book knew, and she put me down the mentoring path. So I did the training course, and I said it's then been since 2014 till today. Just it's been mentoring focused.
So have you been mentoring since that book? And then when did Mentoring Men actually start?
Okay, so we officially launched in November 2018. There was about a 6-month lead up to that. I'm very process driven from the IT side of things. So you had to have a constitution and get forms and a whole bunch of stuff.
Of course.
Most people, I'll start a business. They've got no idea.
That's what I was going to ask you that. Like, what's the actual process to begin a charity? Because like everyone thinks, oh yeah, this will be good, but actually doing it is a whole nother ballpark, I'm guessing. So
it's a really interesting point. What I've seen, like along this journey, this guy contacted me, and I met him at Narrabeen at a pizza place about mentoring men, talk about mentoring men, and he pulls out this one A4 sheet of paper, and he shares about his dream of on the northern beaches and doing something, sporting clubs to reduce suicide. Mentoring men is not just about suicide, it's a whole bunch of other stuff. But so this guy had been working on this for years. Right, that was number one. I go down to Melbourne, have a beer with the bloke down there, and he tells me he was came from Indian culture, and he has this passion to help refugees because he understands what they go through. He's been there for years, but he hadn't done anything with it. So he signed on. I was at Hornsby Water Fountain with the banner. Guy comes along and he tells me he's a social worker. I want to support young dads. And I'm convinced there's so many people who've got a dream, and that's easy. The hard part is actually taking that dream, and what Mentoring Men is, has been a vehicle for those guys and a bunch of other people to fulfill the dream that they've got. And it is a lot of work. Just getting, we have DGR, deductible gift recipient status. Taylor, I know you're a lawyer. I just checked.
Oh yeah, studying.
So someone funded getting lawyers to get us DGR status. You've got a constitution. We've got about 300 documents. You've got online application. And then it started, Ian did everything at the start, but now we have like a corporate comms person. We have social workers. We have the guy who was the general manager of Camp Quality just joined Mentoring Men a month ago, and he's going to run all the operational side of it to free up some of my time. So there's all these people. It's just the thing they have in common is it's just this passion.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's what amazes me. I shared that for a lot of my life, it was about making money. But I've seen a lot of people high up corporately who don't want to be there, and they go and, I can't understand it myself, but they go and do a counselling course or a psychotherapy course or a social work course for crap money, dealing with people's problems. So you go from high paid, high esteem to, but they're doing that because that's what their heart is. That's what they want to do. They want to support other people.
Well, isn't that more or less what you did in 2013?
It was. I guess we're probably in a better financial position. My wife still works. She's a nurse at the local hospital. I was going to say, she gets a bit grumpy. I quit a high-paid job.
We get it, mate. Don't worry.
These people come along. Oh, yeah, my family, and hey, it's been hard. This has been.
Of course.
One of my daughters said to me, "Dad, you care more about these men than you care about your family." I mean, I don't. This has been incredibly fulfilling, but it's challenging as well. There's hard stuff in this, and I guess I need to keep. I've got things up on my wall about why I'm doing this, and I've told my family. And with this guy coming on recently, I believe I'll move from my 7-day-a-week, 10-hour-a-day job, unpaid job, back to something a lot less than that, and post-COVID be able to get out and support. I want to see more of my grandkids and stuff like that.
Can I ask, do these people you're getting on, are they getting paid, or is everyone unpaid volunteers?
So all of our mentors are volunteers. So everything to do with our program is free. But obviously I've been running the organisation as a volunteer, but we're paying someone to take over a lot of what I do. So it's tremendous bang for buck in terms of the number of men. Like there's been, we've been going just over 2.5 years, and over 1,100 men have sought to engage in the program, and it would grow. We could readily make that grow faster, but I mean, there's people who this is their income, so we pay.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So we run training courses every 1 or 2 weeks. So we have we developed our own training course for the mentors, which is feedback we get is fantastic. We also came to arrangement with Wesley Life Force, and we run their suicide prevention course in-house. So we've got a bunch of facilitators. So we provide all that training for free, and it's at the mentees, there's no cost.
Wow. It's very interesting how you kind of turned an idea into a functioning, thriving organization.
That's the thing. That's the step that, well, I would struggle and am struggling massively with that. And then the second thing is struggling to figure that there's more to like life, especially now that we're pretty young, to, you know, making money and all that standard stuff. So,
but I get it. I was there. And if your family, we didn't have enough money for food sometimes. How do you guys get a house?
Exactly.
I get it. Look, we're totally non-political, but it's ridiculous, the prices of houses. I was at a meeting a couple of nights ago looking at trying to get affordable housing. The woman or someone fleeing domestic violence and stuff like that. Yeah, we've allowed it to get to this point where it's gone from what really should be a right to some sort of capitalistic, money-making venture for people buying the 10th and 20th and 30th houses.
Yeah, well, developers and construction.
That's
all of them.
Yeah. One of the reasons we started this kind of podcast was I'm at the end of my degree and Costin's working full-time, and it was kind of like, before we go to that next step, we want to have conversations with people and kind of figure out our path a bit. Like, in terms of speaking for myself, I have a job start. It's not law. I studied law, but I have a job starting in finance next year because this is my last semester. And I don't know whether I'll like it. I think I'll like it, but you don't know. And it's very easy to get trapped on that. You just go, you tick your boxes and you just keep growing and you go up the hierarchy, that kind of thing. So that was part of why we reached out as well to Mentoring Men, because it shows other avenues to life. It's not just uni to grad program to job to corporate ladder. So,
Taylor, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up until I was 59 and a half.
That's what I was going to ask you. Would you have done it again? Would you have?
I still do it again. I guess you learn a lot because my background's an IT manager.
It's completely different.
Yeah, like social media. Like I do 5 or 6 Zoom calls a day now, but I didn't even know what Zoom was. And Instagram, still don't. I mean, Facebook, hashtags, constitutions, Google Forms, CRM. It just goes on and on and on. And it's great. You get to a point when someone comes in and they do that job much better than me, and which is sort of what's happening now. Look, what I'd encourage you guys, if you really want to explore it, the course is free. We ask men who do the course to put in an application, but there's no pressure, there's no commitment. And while the course teaches you our version of mentoring, which effectively is deprogramming a lot of guys, because men come in and think, I've got to fix this guy. I need this knowledge. I need this skill. And that's not what it is. It's like, often it's just silence. It's just listening. But we talk about, we learn about vulnerability. I don't know if you guys have seen the Brené Brown video on vulnerability.
I think I have actually.
It's one of the top 10 TED Talks. We cover it.
We did it in class.
Yeah.
We mental health law, actually. So, yeah.
We learn about values. We learn about self-care. We learn about mental health first aid, suicide prevention. There's a whole bunch of other stuff around that. In fact, guys say to me it was the most important 2 days of their life when they did this. So it's done via Zoom. They said they run, in fact, there's one, the second day, one course is on tomorrow. There's another one next Thursday and Friday. So just, plug in. And plus the suicide prevention training. If every adult in Australia did suicide prevention training, the suicide rate, particularly of males each year, it was 2,520 a year or two ago, and it's actually gone up since then.
That's what I was going to ask. Why do you think the male suicide rate is so high? Deep question.
Look, I think there's several factors. When I grew up, we had the village concept. We never had a telephone, but Mrs. Ryan, 2 houses down, had a telephone. She'd come back and tell us. We could go around, all the kids would be out playing. We'd be kicking a footy, playing cricket, getting up to mischief. But we were all together and we knew all the neighbours. You could go to the neighbours' places. A lot of physical exercise, definite relationship between physical exercise and good mental health. Whereas now there's far more, the kids are on screens, a lot less physical exercise, a lot less the village. Often people don't even know their neighbours. Someone's died next door to someone they haven't known for 2 years. It's like it's so So I think that there's that factor. I think social media is not helped. It's actually in many ways, it's a great way to bully. I'm on Facebook, but people
live on it.
Well, look at me. Look at this fantastic food I'm eating. Look, I'm on my holidays here. Look.
Yeah, it's not good for comparison.
Yeah. Oh, my life's crap. Look how good.
Yeah.
And it's people put the best of themselves on Facebook, and so there's issues like that. I feel that the church used to have far more influence. Like people who are lonely or isolated should always, I'm not saying it's the case, but should always have felt welcome to go to church. But with the decline of the church, often that's not happening. Where do these people go? There's a huge amount of lonely and isolated people, exacerbated by COVID. So I think there's a whole bunch of factors there. But the good news is that we could change that. And it's as the operational stuff of Mentoring Men moves, I want to move on to some other stuff. And this is going to sound crazy to you young guys. As a kid, we would get the healthy sun. We would put coconut oil on our skin and go out in the sun, right? And burn ourselves. I have
skin cancer.
I've just had the second melanoma removed. I've had the trifecta, the squazo, and through education, my grandkids would always have a hat on, at sunscreen, and cover up. The smoking rate was horrendous back as a kid. I used to smoke cigarettes because that was the cool thing to do. But Australia's led the way with anti-smoking. The road toll I grew up in Victoria. It was like in Melbourne, over 1,000. I think it was 1,023 or 32 in 1972, and it led the way with seatbelts and it's done. So if the incentive is there, if we could have a campaign that encouraged men to become more vulnerable, I think the issue is all of us have this perception of what a real man is. And most of the time it's bull dust. It's come from the movie star or the advertising or...
Yeah, Sylvester Stallone.
Exactly. And it's like, and if I'm not coping, if I'm not living up to this ridiculous, impossible image in my head, I feel shame. So I share in Melbourne growing up, my dad would take... I had two brothers, myself, and a bunch of other guys. We'd go down to Streslecki's in Gippsland, and it was all about guns.
Yeah.
And they would shoot anything. I remember this guy would be on his back with a 303, which is a high-powered rifle, trying to shoot wedge-tailed eagles. I hated it. They would go at spotlight. I'm not bagging anyone who wants to do that. I just hated that. So they would go at spotlight, and I would stay back in the camp, because I just didn't want to kill things. But I used to think, wow, I'm not a real man. I don't want to go out and blast something, and it plays with your head. But I'm now, of course, totally fine with it. That's make me less of a man, because I don't want to go blowing things to bits for no reason than just the fun of doing it. So if we had a campaign around getting men to understand that it's okay, whatever, we're all different, and it's okay to share your emotions and to share your feelings and be open and honest if you're not going to flash or whatever, or that you haven't got the answer to every problem. It would just be so much better. So that I'd love to see a campaign around that normalized normal emotions and get men to do that. So we have about 150 more mentors at the moment than mentees. Because the mentors they love it. It's one of the most fulfilling things you can do.
Of course,
better than helping another bloke in life. But it's the men. Like this started because I was looking for a mentor. If we just get a bunch of people to feel like, I guess the openness that I had, recognizing I wanted support, then we'd be a lot better off.
Going through schools and teaching the kids a lot more about it being okay to open up as well these days, which should hopefully help curb the trends in the future.
Yeah,
I know you guys obviously don't mentoring men, not kids, but do you like see that as a very vital part in the future? And would the awareness of kids to mental health and opening their emotions sort of preempted and create a lesser, or like make the issue go away pretty much?
Yeah, look, I think it's a great step, but you need, as part of that, you've got to provide someone they can open up to, someone who's going to play the role, the listening role, the supporting role, the male role model role. And most of the challenges you don't need professionals for. I was mentoring a young kid once, and we'd walk around the school quadrangle. And he said to me one day, he said, Ian, I'd rather, I see the school counsellor. I said, yeah. He said, I'd rather talk to you than the counsellor, which really surprised me because I'm an IT guy. I just happened to be there. The school counsellor's called. I said, why is that? He said, the counsellor sees me because that's his job. That's what he's paid to do. I know you're a volunteer. You're here because you care about me. And it's a huge advantage that our mentors have got, because there's no concept of any ulterior motive. There's no financial transaction that's going on.
Yeah.
And what I think with the school programs, and there's another program, I won't mention it, but it encourages the vulnerability, which is great, but that also needs to be supported with, okay, who's the person through a long-term relationship that you can, and the trust can develop, and then you can go down that path. So I'm all for it. I was part of, I mentored a bunch of schools through the Raise Foundation and also through Kids Hope. So I get that, but there's got to be someone there. And often it's not the parents. My son went through a really difficult time. I didn't even know about it. He didn't share it with me, but he shared it with a mate of mine who would, they go over and do sort of boxing practice. And then my son would just tell, all this stuff came out. And fantastic. I really appreciate my mate doing that and giving my son the opportunity. So it's labor intensive. But you go and see a psychologist, and most men see, I believe the figure is that they only make between 1 and 2 visits to a psychologist. Then they pull out, or even if they want to continue, the government rebate stops after, I think it's 8 visits or something like that. So we recommend our mentoring relationships go for a minimum of 6 months. We've got some that started as soon as we started, and they're still going. So if both men want to continue, fantastic. Just keep it going.
Just from my experience, 23-year-old kind of guy, I can see from my friends, it is kind of difficult. For me personally, I feel like Costin can attest to this. I like talking about my emotions a lot, but in terms of
I don't.
Yeah, Costin doesn't like talking about his emotions at all. It's just interesting to see from real life experience, guys don't like to talk about things, or it's like you got to force it out of them, or it's just interesting. It's just compared to like females that I know, I don't know. It's like it's 2 different species when it comes to feelings. Like my girlfriend loves talking about feelings. I generally do, but when I think about other like guys, it's like trying to get water from a rock. It's very interesting. I don't know.
In general, I agree with you. I think it comes back to the shame thing, and even just looking at the. I can pick what you just said then, Taylor, with Costin and with you, and
yeah, that's pretty obvious.
What's under the surface there, and if Costin had a chance to build trust with a mentor, and I've been in mentoring relationships, and you hear all of a sudden, look, I've never told anyone this before, but wow, or more about me than my mates who I've known for 20 years know. Like you go out with your mates, you talk about sport, talk about whatever.
You get on the piss, and that's it.
Yeah, but I think it's really important. And there's some amazing stuff that comes out. as part of the training course, we do a talking circle. Now, I'd never done one before, so another guy developed the course, and I saw it. I thought, oh, this is going to suck.
I was about to say, my first reaction as soon as you said that was, nah, not for me.
Okay, it was the most impacting thing I think I've ever had, and it was I miss my dad. I can't get access to my kids. My mum gambled away our home, and it's just wow. And you sit in a row. I used to sit in the corporate. I worked most of my life all my paid life in corporate, and you think all these guys have got it together, but they haven't. And it's because they put on this mask, this facade, and you know they do culture checks in a lot of these corporations to work out what the culture is, and often it's really bad. Like there's a lack of vulnerability. It's spin. It's deceive, don't take risks, and but if you got into an organisation where at the head they start sharing some of their own vulnerability, wow, it'd be fantastic. I don't know, but I've got a perception that Atlassian are like that. They've been, the guys have been through their own battles. And if only, but they don't trust each other often at the top of the corporate ladder. It's competition.
You got to build trust, of course. You can't.
Yeah, and so look, underlying mentoring is like, it sounds soppy, but it's almost love. It's validating someone. I've got a sheet up here that they did this study into suicide. And they've some psychologists, you check it out, but it said only 2 interventions have been shown to prevent deaths by suicide. So the two things that for people to be suicidal, one is they call it thwarted belongingness, or I'm alone, right? I'm alone. The second one is perceived burdensomeness, which is I'm a burden. So if you feel that you're alone and you're a burden and you've got a capability and there's high risk, mentoring comes in. Immediately, I'm not alone. I got Taylor over there. He's on my team. He cares about me.
Yeah.
He supports me. Yeah. And I'm a bit. What Taylor loves hearing my stories. He's helped me set some goals, or work with me to set some goals, or work out what I want to be. And hey, we've saved a number of lives through this program, and that's what mentoring can do. We've just worked out a pitch. So we're going out to corporates to talk about the program. And there's a graph. The vertical axis, so the y-axis, is duration of support. And the x-axis, it moves from, if you like, prevention heading through to crisis. So mentoring men is at the top left. It's long-term and it's prevention. The bulk of the support, government focus, is down the bottom right. They're in crisis. And clearly you need crisis support, but how much smarter is it to prevent as many guys getting into crisis? An example, like a guy loses his job. We get a lot of self-esteem and ego from our jobs. Men do. Lose your job. If no one's there to support, you start drinking more. Addiction develops. Relationships fall apart, and all of a sudden you're in crisis. So we walk with guys at that point. So yeah.
Do you do much work in construction? I know there's a couple organizations such as the Black Dog Institute. They jump out to site sometimes and have talks and stuff. And I know that construction workers themselves are a quite high risk, like at committing suicide. Do you guys do any work with those people?
Custom works in construction.
I'm not a tradie. I'm in management, but I see a few people, like a lot of the tradies there. Some of them are very troubled, and I know they do have things in place for them. But yeah,
great question. And I talked before about coincidences. So I met yesterday with the social worker for Mates in Construction for New South Wales. So she explained. So Mates in Construction is an organisation partly funded by government, partly funded by the building industry, and they provide support I think she said for all states other than Victoria and Tasmania. So she was in New South Wales. And she's like a social worker, and they go out and provide some training. But she was incredibly excited about the program. In fact, I'm sending her some flyers. So they will refer. We have 3 ways that men can join Mentoring Men seeking a mentor. One is that they fill out an inquiry form themselves, which is on our website. And that was all we had initially. But then we realized that, like I have a pull-up banner at a market, and women would come up and start speaking to us. Sometimes it'd be in tears. My son, my husband, my father, my brother. And they go home and talk to this guy, and he's got the shame thing up, so nothing would happen. So we introduced it where a family or friend, as long as they have that man's permission, can put a referral in for that guy. And likewise, we partner now with referring agencies, and Mates in Construction will become one of those. But we partner with CORE, who support refugees. We partner Uniting, Catholic Care. We just signed we have a number of MOUs, Memorandum of Understanding. One of them is with Jewish Care, Man Walk, Men's Club. So we partner with a lot of organisations where they can refer men in. So I'm really excited. I'd love to see a lot of, we call them mentees, the guys being mentored, come from Mates in Construction, but there could also be mentors come. We put a lot of thought into the match, and some of those guys, the constructor, Bricky, may want someone who's been going down the same path. We get that.
Well, I know there's a 2 spectrums there, because they're all the manliest men, but they're also the most troubled. So it's like...
She talked about a lot of addiction, both in terms of substance abuse and gambling.
Gambling, substance abuse, everything. Yeah. I see it.
Yeah. So please let them know about this. An advantage of this as well, like in the corporate place, they have a thing called EAPs, employer assistance programs, and you can, if you go, I think you go through the HR area and they'll direct you, and you get some visits to a psychologist or whatever. There's always a question mark if that gets back, and they say it won't. I don't know. I would have been reluctant to do that, but this is something that's totally confidential outside. It's got nothing to do with the work environment. They could just refer out to me. Oh, here's a flyer for Mentoring Men. If you want to just give them have a chat.
And it's free.
It's free. It's free. So yeah, if you please feel free to pass on any details.
Can I? Is this nationwide?
It is. We started in. Are you guys in Sydney?
Yeah, Sydney. Yeah, we're in lockdown.
Yeah. So am I. So we started in Sydney, and but we're in every state of Australia. But the most of our mentors are in Sydney. We have a contract with a PHN. PHN is a primary health network. So Australia is divided up into 31 geographic areas, like think electorates, and the bulk of the federal government health expenditure is allocated through the PHNs. So in Southwest Sydney, which has an incredibly broad demographic, had also a high suicide rate, and they saw mentoring as a proactive way of reducing male suicide. So we're working with a number of the universities, and Western Sydney University is actually doing an analysis of the program to see the impact it's had on both the mentors and the mentees in the program.
Wow, that's interesting. Do you see this going international? Like, do you have certain things you want to tick off before?
Yes. So I've got a board. That was another thing.
I was going to say, you smiled, so you have something.
So Ian's full of ideas and passion, and I'll share one of those in a minute. And then there's his board, pour cold water on what I want to do, but with all the right intentions. And Ian needs a board to keep that under control. So because of the internet, we get a whole bunch of applications from overseas. So we're not meant to be. In fact, this sort of happened before the board said, stop doing that. But like one of our guys is mentoring a guy in Chile. One of the guys I'm mentoring is from Indian culture, was in Australia, but we had to go back to India for family reasons, and now he's locked down over there. So on Thursday night, we had a Zoom mentoring session. So the issues I've talked about aren't unique to Australia. It's the Western world, at least. And yeah, my vision is to for mentoring men to become a global centre of excellence. And we're moving around to, we can enhance the online training, like the setting up the processes and the systems and all that sort of stuff. That's where the bulk of the work is, and the training course and all that. And that's been done. A guy rang us a couple of days ago and said, look, there's a large corporate wants to sponsor us. And then he said they will also want to sponsor a similar organisation that mentors women. And he said, do you know any? And I said, I rang it round, but there isn't one. So I wrote to the board saying we should start mentoring women as well. Anyway, that's when the Cold War, that's why I laughed. Look, it's a huge need. A lot of women contact us. They want to get involved. They want to support someone. And
I was going to ask, are there any mentors that are women?
We thought long and hard about it. And there's a couple of reasons, but one, if you've got a lonely and isolated guy, and then a woman provides this UPR, unconditional positive regard, and like it just make it.
Oh, I get how it can mess with their heads a bit, I guess.
They could think she's keen.
Yeah, look, the main mentor in my life was a woman. But we did think long and hard about that, but there's definitely a need for a mentoring women. In fact, the person I spoke to in Mates in Construction pointed out there was a few hundred women in the construction business in New South Wales, and they also, they have challenges. There's programs, there's women's mentoring programs around young mums, like Raise has one, and I think one of the Jewish organisations has one, but not that I'm aware of in general. There's a couple of opportunities there around women's mentoring and also overseas.
I was gonna ask your views on. We've talked about it on a previous podcast with a psychologist called Dr. Happy, and it was fitting.
It's Dr. Sometimes Happy.
Dr. Sometimes Happy, yeah. Shout out to Dr. Happy. The idea for men in particular of the rise in mental health as well is the rites of passage from a boy to a man has kind of disappeared. So because of that, people struggle to kind of differentiate when you become a man, what that means and all those factors. Do you think a rite of passage is something that is an issue? And do you also think like mentoring men could provide something similar?
Yeah, great point. I remember at school, we would talk about primitive cultures like Indigenous culture. It's unbelievable that would be how they would be described. And you look at these cultures where there's a strong family unity, there's support, they look after the environment. There's a whole bunch of stuff, rites of passage, that we could learn from. And in fact, we're venturing down to really excited about engaging with the Indigenous community around mentor training. We've got one of our mentors, Indigenous leader. And what we want him to do is to look at our training course and work out if changes, like the course stays the same, but whether things need to be modified to suit Indigenous. When we ran the Arabic course, again, the culture over there's a lot more respect for the older people. There's an assumed wisdom amongst that, which is not necessarily the case in Australia. So I think there's a lot of confusion around this whole man thing. And look, I don't know how you make it happen, but I think there should be recognition of the transition from boyhood to manhood. I read Nelson Mandela's book.
I've read that great book.
Yeah. He's one of my heroes, but for them, it was being circumcised with his.
I was gonna say that. Yeah. And then he tied it to his blanket and then slept in it and then buried it, something like that. It was weird.
With an unsterilized.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So I don't think that would be the way to do it now.
You never know.
What age do you start for mentors? Like what age are the mentees? Like, is it from 18, 21 or?
So for mentees, it's 18. There's a lot of school programs, and there is a gap, to be honest, between some kids leave school before 18. But for us, the mentees are meant to be 18. Our oldest, I think, is about 86 or 87. And for the mentors, they have to be 21. And our oldest, I think, is 92. So, and it's a broad cross section. Like, the only thing the mentors have in common that I've seen is just a genuine desire to give back to the community. But they're blue collar, white collar, every culture. We cover 60 different languages last time I checked. Diversity, all sorts of different levels and all that sort of stuff. And the mentees are, again, a really broad cross-section, heart-rending stuff, what they've been through. I used to think I had it hard until you see some of the stories, the backgrounds of these guys. This journey took me down the homelessness path, down the drug path. And I remember talking to one of the mentees once, and I was asking some questions about drugs. And I made a comment. I said, look, I've never taken an illegal drug in my life. And he just looked at me and he shook his head. He said, Ian, I'm amazed. And I said, well, I'm amazed that you're amazed. But and then shortly after that, I actually had a chat with an ice addict and learned a lot about that and what an insidious thing it is. And but interestingly, because I asked a lot of questions, and afterwards he sent me an SMS telling me how much he enjoyed the conversation. And what I think happens, because he's because of his ice addiction, lost his job, lost his family, and all that sort of stuff. But everyone around him is telling him what he should do. I never told him to stop taking drugs, or anything. I just asked questions and showed like.
Yeah, a lot of people just need someone to listen,
not judge.
Yeah,
not judge. And so I think the barriers just come up. You start, you need to do it. It doesn't work when my wife does it with me, and
yeah, it doesn't work with my mum when she does it to me either, or my brother.
Can I how do you pair mentors to mentees? Like,
so there's a whole bunch of factors. So and obviously COVID's thrown a spanner in the works, but one of the biggest factors is geography. Like it's either you meet in a coffee shop, or what works even better, just go for a walk side by side. Because I mentioned when I cried with talking to the counsellor, I didn't want her to see me crying. But if you're side by side, so geography, it could be what the mentee is looking for. Most of the kids I mentored never had a decent male role model. They came from busted families. It could be culture. It could be language. It could be lived experience. I didn't know what lived experience when I started this, but it's someone who's been through a critical experience. Often it relates to suicide, but it could be something else. So it's someone who's actually, a mentor who's like, we've got a mentor whose son suicided, supporting another guy who was suicidal. So it's like, it could be that. It could be common interest. I'll talk about fishing.
Yeah.
Or podcasting or whatever. So there's a whole bunch of things like that get taken into account in terms of working out the match.
And how often do they meet, or is it just up to the mentor and the mentee? So it's all
totally
individual.
Flexible. It's one of the strengths over the school. The school programs, it's Thursday at 10 o'clock, all these men, and that's it. And it goes for 2 school terms, and that's it, regardless.
Yeah.
Whereas, because we're talking 2 adults here, and they can schedule that. It'll be Zoom this week or face-to-face, and then I'm going away, move that around there. So there's a lot of flexibility around that. I don't think anyone would meet more than weekly, and some might even meet, monthly or something like that. that's all fine. They both sign a code of conduct around that. Like we do a lot of, we do validation of the mentors. So there's an application form. We interview them. You learn a lot about someone through the training course. We do a reference check, I'm really cautious. We actually we do a national crime check and a working with children check as well. People say, well, why are you dealing with adults? But, you could be mentoring someone who's got a young child there sometimes or whatever. So yeah, it's up for review, but we definitely err on the side of caution.
Wow. Very interesting. It's great to hear that there is an organization that's like that, especially that's male specific. Well, at least for us, because we're men, I guess. It's good to see that there is something that is very male specific, because I feel like I'd have trouble talking to a female, because I feel like there's things that she wouldn't get if I wanted to speak to someone like that. So it's just interesting.
Well, in the raise mentoring I did at high schools, I would say 90% of the mentors were women, but over half the mentees were boys. So it's like the boys are being mentored by someone who's like their mum.
Yeah.
And for sometimes that would be good. The women, I think, are better at nurturing and caring and all that sort of stuff. But I guess, in fact, one of the questions, Costin, you raised before, I think one of the causes of the increased suicide rate, growing up, I don't think I knew anyone who was divorced.
Yeah,
and it was incredibly rare. There was probably a lot of unhappy marriages, but the kids had a mum and a dad. Whereas now, I don't know, I'm guessing probably half the kids are growing up without their dad, I guess now. So there's no male role model. I was chatting to an Indigenous guy yesterday who went through the foster care system, and he just went from family to family to family, and it's it's nuts. I don't know much about it, but it just seems crazy. And he said one of the families, because he said he's got a disability. I don't know what it was. He said one of the families told him they only took him on because they got more money because of his disability. I mean, it's just
your formative years as well. That would change
he seemed like a great guy. I said there's some really hard stories out there, but we need more male role models. That's what we need, and
I think that's a good point to wrap it up. Thank you for that.
Appreciate you coming on. It's a very deep conversation.
Thank you for taking us on as well for a chat.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Please check us out. And I'd recommend you guys do the course. So, Costin, you learn about vulnerability. And if you do nothing else, go and Google Brené Brown. You'll see she's got this horrible brown suit on, but she talks about vulnerability and how she went through a breakdown stage. It's one of the top 10 TED Talks of all time.
Is that the one with the Roosevelt quote that she brings up? I don't know if you know it, like, by the book. I'm pretty sure I sent that to Costin after I watched that, because my girlfriend was pushing me to watch that thing. It was that I was thinking of
my screen. You can't see it, but it's my screensaver. It is not the critic who counts. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by the dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory or defeat.
That's actually in our training course. Can I just, just occurred to me something to read out that I think is the most powerful thing, but I don't know how to quickly find it. Can you
take your time?
Pause the
take your time. Don't worry. This is good shit.
Can I just finish? I want to read a poem. We talk about this on our training course. It was written back in 1979, but to me, it epitomizes what life mentoring is all about. So it's got by a guy called Ray Horton. Please just listen. When I asked you to listen to me and you start giving advice, you've not done what I asked. When I asked you to listen to me and you begin to tell me why I shouldn't feel that way, you're trampling on my feelings. When I asked you to listen to me and you feel that you have to do something to solve my problems, you have failed me, strange as that may seem. Listen. All I asked you to do is listen, not talk or do, just hear. Advice is cheap, and I can find that myself. I'm not helpless, maybe discouraged and faltering, but not helpless. When you do something for me that I can and need to do for myself, you contribute to my fear and inadequacy. But when you accept as a simple fact that I do feel what I feel, no matter how irrational, then I can quit trying to convince you and get back about the business of understanding what's behind this irrational feeling. And when that's clear, the answers are obvious and I don't need advice. Irrational feelings make sense when we understand what's behind them. Please listen and just hear me. And if you want to talk, wait a minute for your turn and I'll listen to you.
Who was that by?
Ray Horton.
Very nice. Great way to end it as well, like with a nice, memorable finish.
It's funny it was a poem because that's how I get everything out of my head.
Well, good luck, guys. I love what you're doing. Just let's. It will build.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you very much.
Mate.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.